This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Was the fifth most targeted country for cyber attacks in the world last year. What makes Canada such a favorite target? Is it due to our vulnerability?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So, as we have stated in our National Cyber Threat Assessment that was published in 2022, it is very frequent that Canada can be seen as a target because of the role that we play on the world stage. As well, we recognize that there are some state nations that are quite interested to, from a strategic perspective, to do harm to Canada in the cyberspace.
Okay, so there have been 3 cohorts of cyber operators graduate in the last few years, so you must have enough to stand up a military or stand up a command for cyber. And since 2016, we've told the CAF does have a cyber army and a cyber command. So why is there a discrepancy? And if there isn't one, why hasn't it been established yet?
Mr. Chair, I'll take that one. And so up until this point, many of the leaders and some of the functions have been double-hatted within the Canadian Armed Forces and indeed the department, because the cyber enterprise within the Canadian Armed Forces is actually under our CIO. What we're going to be doing is making the Canadian Armed Forces Cyber Command a stand-alone command. Think it's akin to our Special Operations Forces Command, our Intelligence Command, which shows just how important this capability is going forward. It's growing. We need to continue to grow, continue to develop our expertise, and in doing so, working very, very closely, hand in glove with our colleagues at CSE. What
plans are in place for a combined joint all-domain command and control?
So, Mr. Chair, I'll take this one as well. So, JADC2, Joint All-Domain Command and Control, or what we're calling in the Canadian Armed Forces Pan-Domain Command and Control, reflects the changing character of war, where the newer domains, space and cyber, need to be better integrated with the traditional domains of air, maritime, and land, and plus extending that to a whole-of-government approach. And so the seamless integration of the effects in those 5 domains require a new command and control system that can rapidly fuse intelligence, sensor data with shooters, effectors from various domains, and allows decision makers to make much more rapid decisions. So in the context of continental defense, for example, and the policy focuses a lot on that, rightly so from my perspective, as we take a look at the approaches to the continent, it gives us much better awareness what's coming, and then allow us for decision space as to what to do about it.
That's great, CDS. However, there is nothing in the DPU about this. So if a plan's not written down, how do we know that Canada is actually working towards this goal?
So Mr. Chair, not everything in terms of military concepts that we're working on is in the DPU. However, I will say that the reference to digital transformation is absolutely there. And when I take a look at the various capabilities, the various modernization efforts that we need, digital modernization is right at the top of the list. And so we have other initiatives that are ongoing that are supported by the digital transformation hooks that are in the DPU.
So AUKUS has signaled Japan will be invited to join on Pillar 2. What action is AUKUS waiting for to even consider Canada worthy of sharing advanced technology between the UK, US, and Australia?
Maybe I will take that one, Mr. Chair. Pillar 2, indeed, the US announced last week that they're exploring things with Japan. We are actively engaged with AUKUS partners on items related to Pillar 2, AI, quantum, etc. And we continue to work with Pillar 2 partners or AUKUS Pillar 2 members to look at where Canada can add value. We're certainly at the table where we need to be. And
we're not part of it, and we haven't been asked to. So what is it that Canada is missing in order to be at that table?
So AUKUS partners have indicated that they are working on a framework for adding additional countries as partners on projects. That framework is not yet developed, but we are actively engaged in discussions.
When is the earliest possible date that the procurement process for the new submarines will begin, and the earliest date to announce the winner of the bid, based on the planning group's work so far?
So, Mr. Chair, the policy mentions explore. So the options analysis has started. We have had a team meeting with various manufacturers of traditional conventional submarines. We will be looking at options to bring to the government for decision, and they will include conventional versus nuclear, but also how many submarines. So I cannot give you an answer on when at this stage.
So right now it's one in the water for Lucky for every 4 submarines. So I'll be asking about the numbers later. But locally, and General Eyre, you'd be familiar with Petawawa, there hasn't been additional housing for the barracks, new recruits. I understand it's on a cyclic basis, but that's where the majority of Ontario troops end up starting off. So, and we've got lots of capacity, new regiments standing up. When are we going to see some housing so that people can afford to be in the military?
So, Mr. Chair, I'll take this one first, maybe before turning over to the Deputy Minister. So I agree. Housing is a challenge right across the board, not just in Petawawa in Ontario. We have to take a look at our other bases as well. Trenton is another one, but we need to take a look at different ways of doing housing as well. And one of the options we're exploring is public-private partnerships. We've got the land. Interested land developers could perhaps help us develop as well. There's interest in certain areas, certain parts of the country. What I do know is we need to rapidly accelerate housing construction, because that is a shortfall, not just across the country, but for our members as well.
So where's the money for this, though? We all know that land can be repurposed, but there's no money.
Ms. Gallant, you've gone way past your time. On this question will probably be from Mr. Matthews, although I would, if there are other witnesses that want to chime in, that's fine. But on part 3 of the policy, in bold at the top on page 17, it says, "We will establish a Canadian Armed Forces housing strategy, rehabilitate existing housing, and build new housing." Now, setting aside whether or not establishing this strategy is a new policy, which, if that's a new policy, it suggests there was no strategy before, which would be troubling. But if you go to the index, there's actually virtually no money in this new policy. $0 this year, $0 next year for housing for Canadian Armed Forces personnel. The maintaining and renewing national defense infrastructure is $0 this year, $103 million next year. So, how is this an actual policy update when it contains no measurable outcomes, no money or nominal money? It's just a statement that says there'll be a housing strategy. Could you explain how this policy is going to get our troops lodged? We have personnel in tents. We have a 6,000 unit backlog. We have people leaving the forces because of housing. We have a recruitment and a retention crisis. We're 16,000 personnel short. And I don't see anything in this policy statement that's going to solve any of that.
Mr. Chair, I will start with the housing, but the wrap up to that question actually touched on some other elements, including recruiting and retention, that I will leave some time for my colleague, the Chief, to maybe touch on. So on the housing front, as the Minister had indicated, there's a broader set of initiatives happening on housing, because there are two solution sets here. One is housing provided by the military for its members. The second is to live on the economy, as they say, or house yourself on market economy. There's been a series of compensation measures to reimburse those depending on the market they are in for those who choose to live off base. We're also investing already in rehabilitating existing housing, which in some cases needs a refresh, but also build new. So the plan is for 650 units over the next 5 years. The strategy, I think, is the important piece, and General Eyre touched on this, is looking at new ways to possibly partner with others to build housing more rapidly, and that's the part that is to come. But there is still continued investment planning.
So it's not an actual policy, it's an aspiration to someday have a policy. But if I may actually stop you on that number for new housing, 600 units over 5 years, that's not going to fix the backlog. And the existing budget, we had a study on this, the budget for prolonging the life of existing housing, we had testimony on this, would seem to be inadequate. And barracks housing, which Mrs. Gallant talked about, which isn't part of, and that's a separate issue from the rest of the housing that we've talked about, but we've heard deplorable conditions in some barracks, as well as other workspaces and buildings that are, and I see the Chief Defense Staff is nodding on this point. Where is the actual plan and policy to fix these problems that are driving people out of the forces? General, do you want to?
So, Mr. Chair, let me go back to the strategy for a second, and why this is so important. So, we need this in place so that we've got a view on housing that will take us into the future as we bring in the units and the capabilities that we see articulated in this policy. If we go back in time to the end of the Cold War, where we demolished or sold off thousands of housing units, arguably that was the peace dividend being cashed in, which we have done numerous times over the course of the last 30 years. We've got to be thinking ahead as to what units we need, what capabilities we need, where new people are going to be going. On-base and off-base housing, what incentives, benefits are required for off-base housing as well to assist members who want to live on the economy. So it's got to be a holistic strategy from that perspective. That is the long term. Short term, I agree with you. We have a short-term housing challenge right now. We need to repair and upgrade single and residential housing units as quickly as possible.
And yet it's $0 in the next 2 years in this update
Kelly.
on that.
Thank you for editorial comments.
The defense policy update signals some changes, but I didn't see any commitments to reforming on outsourcing and the contracting practices. Recently, we had testimony from UNDDN and PIPSI leadership here. They're very frustrated, as are we, about this idea of value for money analysis, which they can't get any answers out of. And in fact, when Mr. Matthews, when you were here before the committee, you had talked about that analysis, and yet nobody seems to be able to get that analysis out or to see through it. Those auditing practices aren't as transparent or transparent at all. So, can you provide a bit more commentary on? I'm sure you saw the testimony from the union leadership on all of that. Can you provide some comments on that for us here today?
Certainly, and it comes up in a number of areas. Yes, from our union colleagues, but also when we talk to military members who are on base managing budgets, we often hear about, I've got money in this pocket, for contractors, but I'd rather have employees, or in some cases vice versa, because I can't find employees, but I can get contractors. So we are reinforcing with those who manage budgets on bases that there are ways to move money into the most efficient place. Where we have made commitments around value for money is any time a new idea for, I'll say, outsourcing or taking public service work and using contractors is being put on the table, we demand a business case. There are no active discussions around any of that right now, so I have no business cases to share, but that is a requirement we have shared with our management team. Equally, where there is more efficient ways to do business by turning, moving away from contractors and using public servants, we are also encouraging people to look at that. We've had some interesting experience with one of those, as you would be aware, recently, but there are active discussions where the labor force exists, where we can turn contractors into public servants and we know it's long-term work, it's actually typically more efficient for us to use public servants in that scenario. We have other scenarios where the skill set doesn't exist in the public service, so contractors will continue to play a role, but there's nothing explicit here. I will say the reductions or reallocation exercise that we were talking about a few moments ago, that is actually driving a lot of conversations around what is the right model to deliver a service. And if it's cheaper to use public servants or more efficient to use public servants, we are certainly welcome to those discussions. In some cases, the labor force does not exist.
Thank you, Ms. Masson. Mr. Bazan, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to follow up on Mr. Matthew's question, your comments right now, Mr. Matthews. You want to turn more contractors into employees of the Department of National Defence. We just went through Dalian Enterprises and Mr. Yo, and that he received over $8 million in contracts through the Arrive scam situation that we're dealing with. That's quite the scandal. And then he became an employee of the department. You have suspended him. You have turned this over to the military police, my understanding, and being investigated. What's the status of that investigation?
So we have made the military police aware of the situation. Mr. Yo's employment has been terminated. He resigned, in fact, before we could move to termination. And so we are continuing to investigate any potential work he was doing. To date, we have confirmed that, of the contracts he was working on before he became an employee, services were delivered in a satisfactory manner. We are still looking to make sure there are no instances where he was doing contract work while he was an employee, and we have yet to find any, but that work is ongoing.
But at the same time, we know through the Arrive scandal that they were getting contracts without providing any work and were subcontracting it. So as part of your investigation, cooperating with the RCMP on the broader investigation going into the Arrive scandal?
The department will cooperate with any police investigation. As it relates to Mr. Yo's work as a consultant with National Defence, and then he did the same work as an employee. So this was an example of someone who was doing full-time contract work, and somebody realized, in theory, it would be better to make him an employee, more efficient. That work was delivered as advertised, and so no issues there, but obviously we will cooperate with any police investigation.
I want to move on to my next round of questions. First of all, I want to thank General Eyre. I don't know if we'll have you back again before the end of session and before you retire as Chief of Defence Staff. And I want to thank you for your incredible service and leadership that you've provided during a difficult time in the Canadian Armed Forces. We scanned through the Defence Policy Update, and no place do we talk about war footing. We know that from the Department's reports that only 58% of the Canadian Armed Forces are standing ready and can be deployed. The Air Force is in even worse shape with 55% of its equipment is unserviceable or unavailable. The Royal Canadian Navy, 54% of the ships and crews there are undeployable. And we, of course, Admiral Topshee's video spoke to that. The Army is 46% of the equipment is unserviceable. We talked about 16,000 troops short. 10,000 troops are under-trained and undeployable. Where are we at right now with the number of troops that we have, total members of the Canadian Armed Forces? And my understanding is 15,000 people applied to be members of the Canadian Armed Forces and were turned away or walked away because of the timelines taken to recruit.
Well, Mr. Chair, there's a lot in there. So firstly, on the policy document itself, and you talked about war footing, and so the characterization of the security environment and how as it applies to Canada with the geopolitical, with the technological change, with climate change that's in there. Happy with that. Likewise, with the strategic framework of the focus on foundational readiness and deterrence, absolutely necessary. And I think something that all Canadians need to realize is the relationship of our vital national interest of prosperity to deterrence, deterring aggression, deterring instability in the international order. As a trading nation, absolutely required. You think we got financial problems now? If we can't collectively deter, further imperialism and the like, it's going to be much, much more difficult. In terms of readiness, again, happy to see that we were listened to in terms of building up foundational readiness. Before we get new capabilities, we need to build readiness in what we have. If we look at the pillars of readiness, personnel, which I'll get to in a second, equipment, and the serviceability rate for which we're getting the national procurement funds. Not everything we asked for, but
Interesting here because I think that we got a lot here to discuss in the defense policy update. So I want to move the following motion so we can dig into this in greater detail. That given the state of the Canadian Armed Forces, which is experiencing record low recruitment and retention and sees active service members using food banks and are unhoused, pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study on the timeline and implementation of the defense policy update. That the committee shall hold a minimum of 7 meetings for the duration of the study, and that the committee invite the Minister of Public Service and Procurement along with relevant defense industry, academics, and other stakeholders, and that the committee report its findings to the House.
Mr. Fisher.
Well, I was just going to suggest that if it's possible to amend taking out the committee report, its findings to the House, and supplement that with pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee requests a comprehensive government response.
Amendment on the table. That's the second amendment.
Thought maybe I'd add to Marie France's amendment.
We're not going to get to a vote on this.
Okay.
Well, because we've run out of time, that's why.
No, we can still.
You can vote.
You can vote.
Do we still have time?
Because of the suspension, yeah.
Okay.
5 more minutes.
So we've got 5 more minutes. Okay, so at this point, we've dealt with any other speakers on this?
Well, what are we voting on?
Well, that's it. That's it.
Voting on the 3 dates, minimum 3.
Yeah.
The Lalonde Amendment.
So better known as the Lalonde Amendment. So we're good for on 3. So the amendment is 3 on Mr. Bazan's main motion. Those in favor? Those opposed? Okay. That amends the motion. So now the motion as amended. Those in favor?
Sorry, wait. Something else.
He called the question. He called the question. But he called the question.
He knows I have an amendment.
He didn't because you called the question.
Yeah, if I'd known it, I would have. No, I did call the question, and I did not know about any other amendment. So the motion as amended, I'd called. So those in favor? Those opposed? And with that, we will adjourn this meeting.